So, the one thing that really stood out in the past year is the ways that I was overriding my natural way of being, my own intelligence, and my nervous system. And this showed up in the way I used to market, the way I used to uh, look at, being visible for my work, for business, and even in my goals and desires. And I didn't totally realize that in a way that I could then shift it. And that's what this video is about. I want you to see through example how some of the places that we think are just normal, it's the way most people seem to operate, the way a lot of the training is led these days, can actually go against what is our natural brilliance and the way we're going to discover whether it's our genius, the way the next system that we need is going to be, like the best and the smoothest for what we are trying to create, the way that we can actually enjoy life and have relaxation while we have our ambitions. So, one thing that I noticed was that I would say, compared to many people, that I get enough sleep, I aim to rest, I don't um, overfill my day typically with lots of things to do. However, that was based on a certain picture of what rest looks like instead of tending to it in the moment. So there were days, and this is just part of my energy, the way it flows, is that I have some very high creative days, or maybe a chunk of time. Sometimes, for example, at night, suddenly like a new brainstorm shows up, and like I want like 4 hours straight at that point because that's when the energy is alive. And then naturally, one afternoon, I might actually want to take a nap. And even though it might be the middle of the afternoon, like my head would say, hey, don't do that. Like, get things done. Or there's things that need to be done during the day that you can't do at night. So you have to do them. And that kind of have to and that should would creep in. And this wasn't necessarily dramatic, by the way, right? These are just kind of the subtle moments that we can easily override in that conversation with ourselves, right? And so what I began doing was, and you might have heard this on some of my videos from last year, literally taking a nap if I needed to, literally deciding, okay, I'm just going to let this work go for now, and I'm going to go out for a walk. I'm going to take a break. I'm not going to put a deadline on this really important piece of creation that I'm working on, right? So I began to allow for things when they needed it. And what I discovered blew me away. I would find that sometimes, even if I had a couple of days of that kind of low energy, by the third day or the fourth day, I would get this sudden download that was like the exact answer or a specific action that I had wanted to take for a long time and for whatever reason couldn't, or the circumstances wouldn't let me. And then I was able to do that. And I didn't just do that once, I experienced this over and over again. So I had started to listen to myself. I began to pay attention to my body's cues. When did it need to have time to integrate some of what I was doing? When did it need to just let go and not think about anything? All of this, by respecting it and honoring it, allowed those breakthroughs to start happening. And I would say in the past year, I was able to put things down on paper that in the past might have taken me months or years. And it would come in like a full swoop, just like a page of clear content just would come and it's done, and I don't have to touch it anymore. That's how simple it began to be. The other thing was, as much as I talk about, again, honoring the self, it's so easy to have, lists or like ideas about, well, this task, let me see if I did it 5 days, next week for 5 days, it would get done and then I could move to the next. But guess what? I don't operate on that level of repetition typically. And so I could do 2 days, and then by the third day, I just like have no interest in it. Just no desire. And it's really easy to push oneself in the moments like that, right? To force oneself to override that. And a lot of the messages today are about overriding. And the thing is, I have also done that previously. Not maybe in the desperate ways that I find that some people do, but in the ways that I was kind of negotiating, like, oh, well, this amount is okay. But guess what? The results would never make it worthwhile. They just were not good enough. And so what I'm finding now is, again, by honoring the fact that I work in a certain way that doesn't like repetition daily, day in, day out. Even if I say it's only for 2 weeks, say I'm writing, a chapter of a book or something, or a few chapters or the whole book, and I'm like, hey, I can do it in 2 weeks. I mean, it's one of those creative things that we can't control. And if we do control, yes, you can finish it. It's not that like I have the writing capacity and the ability to do that. But in terms of the quality that I actually desire, the impact that I'd like to have, that is not the most effective way of working, right? For you, it may be something much more, like even say technical things, right? Like if I do this technical piece and learn this and whatever, that again, I can squish it into 3 days. I can focus a whole month on it. But if you're not the kind of person who is built that way with that kind of focused attention, but your mind perhaps goes to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 things, and you're all kind of moving and juggling them, and you find that instead, you got 2 great days on, say, the technical piece, then you take a break, and then, 4 days later, you're like, oh yeah, I had this creative idea, let me get that down. That may actually work way better for you. And it's an experimentation. There's not even a right answer. I can't create a complete formula, because as soon as I create a complete formula, guess what happens? It becomes repetition again, right? So has to be this aliveness moving through it, right? There's not only my energy, there's energy of the world, what's going on, not only in myself, but in the people around me and in the greater world, right? So all of these things can impact us too. And it's not to be at their whim, but to acknowledge that we may flow in different ways. And when we are truer to ourselves, guess what? We do get the best out of ourselves. I also really, something else landed that I have known for a long time, but again, it's not something you can just do, right? If it were that easy, everyone would do it, they say, right? It's kind of like, so let's look at marketing, for example. If I was marketing on a platform that I don't enjoy, and I'm marketing and I'm doing it day in, I'm doing day out, and I'm like consistent and I'm following all the tips, that may still not work. We hear the success stories, but we don't hear a lot of the failure stories. And the failures aren't necessarily because the work wasn't good. It was because of placement. Am I showing up where I need to show up? Is there a resonance between me and whether it's a platform I'm using or an audience that I'm speaking to? Because when there isn't a match, you can do all the things right and still it will not work. And this is some inner work that sometimes needs to be done. Sometimes what we have to offer is at a higher level than the people that have been around us, that we're used to being worked with, right? And if that's the case, then your message may not actually be getting through because they're just at a different level. And this is not right or wrong. This is not better or worse necessarily. It's different, right? It's like would you present a university level course to 9-year-olds, right? No, right? You know that. So placement became even more key and more important. And when you know that, then sometimes just the slightest drop can ignite exactly the impact and the effect you are able to truly have. After I would respect and honor these rhythms, I would acknowledge where something wasn't a fit and actually begin to say, well, where would it be a fit? And I didn't have to know all the answers for that. I just knew where my enthusiasm was getting activated. That was beginning to tell me the answers. And then it was like, again, let's talk about the nervous system. My nervous system would just relax because it would be like, oh, imagine that, right? Like imagine being there. Imagine talking to this group. And then like everything is relaxed because I don't have to convince. I don't have to explain. I don't have to try and be like anyone else. I don't have to mimic anyone else in order to speak clearly. My coherence just comes out, right? So this is what the kinds of shifts that began to happen. And essentially what emerged is what I would just call natural intelligence. Natural intelligence emerges when we stop forcing our output and build from clarity and coherence. We allow ourselves to go deep into who we are, deep into whether it's a message or a product or a vision, deep into playing, maybe just being creative. And then we begin to embody that. And then we communicate that. And sometimes we can communicate it without even saying a word. I've had instances in my life where complete strangers have made comments to me about what they perceive, and I didn't even have a conversation with them, but they felt it. Because in those moments, I was in resonance, I was in some kind of truth, I was in some kind of coherence, really like being with myself, my vision, my ideas. I was in my field, my natural field, and that transmits. That's why I've had so many examples, some of which I've shared before, where I've literally made one application to something, where I spoke to one person, where I got one referral, and then that just like opened up a new level of opportunity or abundance. Because we don't always need the millions of people on us, with eyes on us, in order to create that level, right? It really depends on your product, your service, what you're here to do. And when you name that, when you know that, when you feel that, then it's easier to find the avenues in which you can get to be who you are in your own way, your natural intelligence. And so much gets kind of like comes to you, right? This is the law of attraction. You don't even have to study the law of attraction. It begins to operate because it's just there, right? This magnetic, I'm already this, and therefore you're going to attract more of that. So here are a couple of questions that you can think about for yourself. Where in your life, perhaps in your business, are you more performing based on trying to be consistent rather than on creating and building from, inner coherence, like when you're like, yeah, that's it? Where are you making decisions that are based more on, like, you're in a state of fragmentation, dysregulation. You're just like, your mind's all over the place and you're trying to make a decision, or you're in a bad mood and you're trying to make a decision, instead of making it from a place of being steady, in trust, and with clarity. Because those two are completely different. It can take a bit of work to arrive at the latter, but you can save yourself weeks and months and sometimes years. Now, if your nervous system, the way, you can call it that, you can call it the way you're designed, if that began to lead your ambitions, what would change now? What would begin to be different? And in what way? So I'm going to leave you with those questions for now. And I'd love to hear some answers, responses in the comments below. And I will catch you next time.